There are days it feels like the football gods picked the exact moment to test the Chargers, and this is one of those days. A surprise piece just showed up on the chessboard right as the playoffs hit, and the detail behind it says a lot about how this team is thinking about January, and even 2026. At the same time, one quiet roster call has the potential to change the temperature inside the locker room, and the road is set. Travel, cold weather, and a matchup that demands you win in the trenches. Do you trust the plan? All right. If you're riding with Bolt Fam, hit like, and let's get into it. Now that the regular season is done, the picture is clear. The Chargers are headed to New England to face the Patriots in the first round of the playoffs, coming off that loss to the Denver Broncos. And I know, nobody wanted to limp into January with a bad taste in their mouth. But the second this matchup locked in, one thing became impossible to ignore. You can't go into a cold, physical playoff game feeling shaky up front. You just can't. Which is why a move that started as, interesting, quickly turned into, okay, I see what they're doing here. Before the Broncos game even happened, the news dropped that a fellow AFC contender cut loose one of their former offensive linemen, and it immediately gave Chargers fans that spark of hope. Because we've watched this offensive line get pushed around all year. We've watched the interior cave in. We've watched pressure turn clean pockets into chaos. So when a big-bodied draft pedigree lineman hits the street, Bolt Fam is going to look at it and say, why not us? And that's exactly where Ben Cleveland enters the chat, former Ravens third-round pick in 2021. A guy scouts described as a massive human, with tools and a frame that jumps off the page. We're talking 6'6", around 350 pounds, with some outlets listing him even bigger. Just picture that walking into an NFL locker room. Like, you don't need a nameplate to know who he is. Now let's be real for a second. Chargers fans have seen the giant interior lineman idea before, and it hasn't always ended well. Mekhi Becton is the example everybody brings up, and I get it. Size alone doesn't fix anything. But Cleveland at least has shown some promise when he's actually been on the field. The issue with him has never been, does he belong in the league? The issue has been availability and consistency. He hasn't seen the field often enough. And the context matters. Cleveland dealt with off-the-field issues, missed time due to a mix of suspensions, off-the-field situations, and minor injuries. And eventually the Ravens decided to move on from a player they drafted just a few years ago. The Chargers brought him in on the practice squad. At the same time, the same report had the Chargers cutting Marcus May from the active roster. But those are likely two separate moves, not some direct swap that's tied together. What you're getting with Cleveland on paper is an interesting depth option with real versatility in his background. With the Ravens, he logged 688 snaps. He's taken snaps at both tackle spots, even if it was only 2 at each. Played 639 combined snaps at left and right guard, got 10 snaps at center, and even took 35 snaps as an extra offensive lineman in certain packages. And for a team that's been searching for answers inside, that versatility matters. Performance-wise, Cleveland has been above a 50.00 PFF run-blocking grade every season, and he averaged a 62.5 pass-blocking grade over his time with Baltimore. Again, nobody's calling him a savior. But compared to what the Chargers have been dealing with on the interior, that profile reads like an upgrade on paper. Here's the real question, though, and it's the one you should be asking right now. How much impact can he realistically make with only a week or two to get up to speed before the Chargers' most important game of the year? That's not a small hurdle. Is this a move for immediate insurance in case depth gets tested? Is it more about 2026 bringing in a legitimate competitor for a room that's been shaky all year? Is he just a body, or is he a plan? That's what makes this interesting, because it's not flashy, but it's strategic. And while we're talking about decisions that don't always show up in the box score, there's another one that quietly matters a lot as you look ahead. Because sometimes the biggest roster call is the guy you keep on the bench until you need him. That's been the Trey Lance story. Back at the start of the year, when Lance won the backup quarterback job, a lot of people were surprised. People expected something safer, something familiar. Instead, the staff leaned into tools, mobility, upside, fit, and it sat in the background for months. It barely mattered until it suddenly mattered. Week 18 was the moment. Justin Herbert sat. The Chargers rested key starters, and Lance got handed a brutal assignment. Go start against a Denver defense that wasn't taking the day off. The Broncos didn't rest starters because they still had seeding on the line, and their pass rush was real. So Lance wasn't walking into some preseason vibe. This was a live NFL game against a defense coming for you, with an offense missing a lot of its usual pieces. The final result? Ugly. 3 points. Choppy rhythm. Throws under pressure. But the context is the entire story. The offensive line issues that have been a weekly problem all season didn't magically disappear. The chemistry wasn't going to look smooth. And Lance still ended up as the team's leading rusher with 69 yards, which tells you exactly what he can offer when the structure breaks down. He can keep plays alive. He doesn't freeze when things get messy. Nobody's pretending it was a breakout performance. It wasn't. But it also wasn't the kind of disaster that scares teams into thinking he's unplayable. And oddly enough, that's helpful for the Chargers, because when a backup quarterback lights up the stat sheet, the league starts dreaming. Teams start thinking starter potential, and suddenly you've got a bidding situation. Look at what happened with Malik Willis in Green Bay. When a backup flashes big numbers, the price goes up fast. Lance didn't create that kind of market pressure. He didn't put himself in the go-get-him-as-a-starter conversation, which means the Chargers should be in position to retain him on another short, affordable deal as Herbert's backup. And that's not nothing. A steady QB2 is stability. It's continuity in the playbook. It's less turbulence in the locker room. It's not having to reteach your entire quarterback room every offseason while you're trying to fix everything else. Not glamorous, but it's a smart team move. Now, I already know what some of you are thinking. Cool, but I'm still mad about the Dante Jackson situation. I hear you. Because that reaction wasn't just frustration. It was that deep Chargers fan muscle memory. The second he went down, it felt like the kind of moment that turns into a long off-season conversation. In Week 18, even with plenty of starters resting, Dante Jackson started against Denver. And it took only minutes for the worst-case fear to show up. Awkward contact, trainers on the field, the blue tent, then the locker room. And in that moment, Bolt fam didn't respond with sadness. It was indignation, because in the fans' mind, that risk didn't need to exist. It was impossible not to think back to past situations where a similar choice ended up costing way too much. But when you zoom out and look at the full roster picture, it gets more complicated. Almost annoyingly complicated. The Chargers went into that game with limited options at corner. The active roster had only 5 cornerbacks. Keeping Tarheeb still healthy was a priority. Benjamin St-Juste was already dealing with an injury. Nico Reed had been placed on injured reserve the day before the game. Somebody had to line up, and Jackson was the most reliable name available. That doesn't make the risk feel good. It doesn't make the decision feel clean. It just explains the corner the Chargers were backed into. You can't realistically rest every starter for every snap at every position, especially when your depth chart is already thin. Somebody is going to be exposed. And in football, all it takes is one weird angle, one awkward collision, one snap that goes sideways. And this matters beyond emotion, because it affects how the defense functions. The Chargers' secondary hasn't been about one single superstar carrying everything, but Jackson has become the stabilizer, the piece that lets everything else breathe. Without him, every snap demands more communication, more help, more caution. And when you start thinking about a playoff opponent like the Patriots or the Jaguars if things had fallen differently, both are the type of teams with quarterbacks who can attack space and punish mistakes. That's why this hit so hard in real time. If Jackson can be out there, the defense keeps its identity. If he can't, it becomes a depth and adjustment test for Jesse Minter, and the margin gets thinner. Either way, that Week 18 moment reminded everyone how fragile the line is between "we're fine" and "now we're scrambling." And that brings us right back to the oldest wound of them all, the offensive line. Even with backups on the field, the problem still showed itself, because it's been a season-long issue. Too many sacks, too much pressure, and Justin Herbert playing on the edge week after week. Between injuries, bets that didn't work out, and changes that came late, this has followed the team into January. So now it all connects. Quiet roster moves, calculated risks, and the little decisions that become big the moment the playoffs start. Here's the final question, and I want you to actually answer it. Do you believe these lessons turn into immediate action? Or are we headed for another offseason of talking about it instead of fixing it? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe.